Welcome back to the Crosstalk Cafe right here in South Park. We're just so glad you decided to pull up a chair and join us today. I'm one of your leaders here, and this is a space we've specifically designed for mental health, for Christian wellness, and for those really honest, completely unfiltered conversations.
Yeah, the ones that so many of us desperately need, but we rarely have the courage to actually start. I'm also one of the leaders here, and I'm really looking forward to what we're getting into today.
Same here. Today, we are settling in for a long, close look at a core concept we teach, which is known as Principle 2. It revolves entirely around our willingness to change.
Right.
And specifically, we're confronting this wild paradox sitting right at the center of the human experience, like why we so often actually prefer familiar pain over the fear of the unknown.
It is a profound paradox. And honestly, it is the invisible barrier that keeps an untold number of people just completely immobilized in their lives.
You stuck.
Exactly. Stuck. We are going to take our time today, moving really slowly and deliberately through this, because rushing past the discomfort of this specific topic is, well, it's exactly how we stay stuck in those cycles of misery.
Definitely.
If you are listening to this right now and you feel like you are perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough, but you somehow keep sliding back into the dark, this conversation is custom tailored for you.
There was a time in my wellness journey where I was actually terrified of getting better. It sounds crazy, but my anxiety and depression had become a weird kind of comfort zone. I knew how to navigate the darkness, and the thought of stepping out of it felt completely terrifying.
It doesn't sound crazy at all. It's a massive mental health hurdle that so many of us face. We resist change because of the fear of the unknown, or because despair has convinced us we don't deserve a better life. But in Ephesians chapter 4, the Word of God gives us an incredible roadmap. Paul tells us to put off that old self and its deceitful desires and to be made new in the attitude of our minds. Today at the cafe, we're talking about how hope opens the exact doors that despair has slammed shut. Let's talk about finding the courage to let God make us better instead of bitter.
Better instead of bitter. Man, that right there, that establishes the entire mission of our time together today.
It really does.
We are aiming for three highly specific goals for you, the person listening right now. First, we need to recognize the deceitful comfort of our own dysfunction, like to see it for what it really is.
Yes, exposing the lie.
Right. Second, we're going to break down the actual practical mechanics of renewing our minds, not just the theory, but how it actually works on a random Tuesday morning.
Which is the hardest part.
Oh, absolutely. And ultimately, we're going to learn how to allow painful circumstances to produce betterment rather than bitterness.
It's a tall order. To even begin, we have to recognize that when we talk about resisting positive change, we're not talking about a simple lack of willpower.
Right. It's not just try harder.
No, not at all. We are dealing with a profound psychological and spiritual phenomenon here. The human mind has an incredible and sometimes highly detrimental bias toward the predictable.
Predictability is safe.
Exactly. Predictability, even if it is agonizing, is quantifiable. You know it's coming.
So let's anchor this immediately in the Word of God, because we are brought directly to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 22. It says this, "You were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires."
That phrase is just so critical.
It is. But I want to stop right there for a second, because the phrase deceitful desires, well, it feels like it needs a lot of translation when we apply it to mental health.
Absolutely it does, because when people typically hear the word desires in a biblical context, they immediately jump to something overtly hedonistic.
Yeah, like greed or arrogance or unchecked lust, things like that.
Right. But within the specific landscape of mental health and Christian wellness, a deceitful desire often wears a much quieter, more insidious mask.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It looks like the craving to isolate. It looks like the profound, heavy urge to just stay completely submerged in clinical depression or chronic worry.
Let's pull on that thread, because conceptually, that feels completely contradictory. How does a struggle with clinical depression morph into a desire?
That's a great question.
Because nobody wakes up and actively wants to be depressed. Nobody experience chronic anxiety on their vision board for the year.
Yeah, consciously, no, you're absolutely correct. No one consciously desires to be in pain. But subconsciously, what happens is that the old self begins to crave the predictability of that state.
It gets used to it.
It gets dependent on it. It becomes a deceitful desire, specifically because it lies to the mind. It offers this twisted promise of safety. Think about the messaging of clinical depression or severe social anxiety.
Okay.
The condition whispers to you, stay in the shadows. It is quiet here. No one expects anything of you if you stay in bed. It is safe.
Right. Don't go out there, you'll just get hurt.
Exactly. It promises protection from any further disappointment. The logic it feeds you is that, well, if you are already voluntarily sitting at the absolute bottom, the world cannot push you down any further.
Man, that is so heavy, but it's true. So the deceit is that it frames isolation as a protective shield. Let's translate that into actual human behavior to see the mechanics of it.
Yeah, let's ground it.
Imagine waking up on a Saturday. You feel incredibly heavy. You're physically drained, emotionally weary, and you had made plans earlier in the week to go out, maybe meet up with a small group of people who are supportive, or just go to a coffee shop with a friend.
A very common scenario.
Super common. But as you look at the ceiling, that desire kicks in. The desire says, just cancel. You're too fragile today. Stay in bed. Protect your energy.
Yes.
And the terrifying part is, in the precise moment you send that cancellation text, you feel a massive, undeniable wave of relief.
Yes. And that wave of relief is exactly what makes the desire deceitful.
Because it feels like you did the right thing.
Right. It masquerades as self-care. It gives you a short-term hit of comfort. But what is it actually doing mechanically?
Keeping you trapped.
It is reinforcing your isolation. It is building the walls of your cage a little bit higher and a little bit thicker. It is a lie that promises sanctuary, but it actually delivers captivity.
Wow.
The old self is corrupted by these exact types of deceitful desires that actively, aggressively work against your long-term wellness while pretending to be your bodyguard.
While pretending to be your bodyguard, that completely reframes the entire struggle. Because if my depression is pretending to be my bodyguard, well, no wonder I'm hesitant to let it go.
Exactly. You think it's keeping you safe.
Which brings us to the core tension we mentioned earlier, the fear of the unknown. Why is the known darkness so much more appealing to us than the unknown light?
Because the unknown requires vulnerability, and the old self absolutely despises vulnerability.
Because vulnerability means you can be hurt again.
Precisely. Healing introduces an incredible amount of unpredictability into a life that has fundamentally learned to survive by predicting the worst.
I really want to talk about the identity crisis of healing here, because I don't think this gets discussed nearly enough in wellness circles.
I agree. It's often entirely overlooked.
If you have been the anxious person in your family for a decade, your brain knows how to play that role perfectly. Your family members know exactly how to interact with that version of you.
Yes, the dynamic is set.
They walk on eggshells, they manage your triggers, they accommodate you. Your friends know exactly what to expect. There is a whole ecosystem built around your dysfunction.
A fragile ecosystem, but a familiar one.
Right. So the terrifying question becomes, who are you if you are suddenly well? Who are you if you no longer require everyone around you to accommodate your worry?
This raises such a crucial tension for anyone listening who might be sitting right on the edge of a breakthrough today. We have to validate the sheer terror of walking into a newly healed identity.
It is completely destabilizing.
It is. Because if you step into wellness, does that mean you're suddenly going to be handed new, overwhelming responsibilities?
Like, oh, you're better now, so you can take all this on.
Exactly. Does it mean you lose the sympathy and attention of your friends? Does it mean the people who have faithfully rallied around your crisis for years will suddenly step back and leave you to stand entirely on your own?
I can completely understand why someone would retreat from that. I mean, if my entire relational world is built on the foundation of my struggle, pulling that struggle out feels like collapsing the whole building.
It does. It feels like self-sabotage to get better.
Yeah. It is entirely normal to be afraid of who you will be without your familiar pain. Removing that central pillar means the whole house has to be rebuilt. And rebuilding takes an immense amount of energy when you are already just so weary.
And this is where we see the tragedy of the familiar pain playing out. You go to a meeting or you have a profound moment of clarity in prayer or a breakthrough conversation with a friend, and you suddenly see the light.
You see the hope.
You see the tangible possibility of a life that isn't defined by chronic worry or heaviness. But then you step right up to the threshold, you look out at that wide open, completely unpredictable space of wellness, and the fear paralyzes you.
You just freeze.
You freeze, and then you retreat. You go back to the familiar pain because it is the room you know how to navigate completely blindfolded. You know exactly where the sharp edges are.
You know where the sharp edges are? Yeah. And we retreat because right at that threshold, a very specific narrative starts playing in our minds.
A very loud narrative.
The curriculum identifies this as the voice of despair. Despair acts as the enforcer of the old self. When the sheer fear of the unknown isn't quite enough to keep you stuck, despair steps in to definitively slam the door shut.
Despair is highly methodical, too. It doesn't just offer vague feelings of sadness. It offers highly specific, tailored arguments against your healing.
What does that sound like specifically?
It tells you, you have made far too many mistakes to be made well now. Or it looks at your lineage and says, your family history is entirely too broken. Look at your parents. Look at your grandparents. This is just who your people are, and you cannot escape your genetics.
Wow. It makes it sound like an absolute life sentence.
It does. The ultimate lie that despair pushes is a narrative based entirely on merit. It aims to convince you that you simply do not deserve anything better than the current level of misery you are experiencing.
It weaponizes the past against the present. It takes every failure, every moment of weakness, every fractured relationship, and it compiles them into this meticulous resume of reasons why you are permanently disqualified from Christian wellness.
That's exactly how it operates, a resume of failures.
But I want to push back on this for a second.
Yeah.
Because this is where it gets incredibly difficult in actual practice.
Okay, let's hear it.
What if those past mistakes are undeniably real? Like, what if you really did completely shatter a relationship? What if your family history really is a verifiable generational cycle of addiction or abuse?
Those are very real situations.
Right. So how do you practically argue with despair when despair isn't making things up, when it's actually using verifiable facts to make its case?
That is the pivotal question, and it is exactly where the Christian wellness paradigm completely upends the conventional approach to healing.
Okay, how so?
Because if wellness were based on a system of merit, despair would be absolutely correct.
Oh.
Think about it. If you had to earn your emotional wholeness by presenting a flawless track record, the facts of your past would entirely disqualify you. You wouldn't stand a chance.
None of us would.
None of us. But Christian wellness is not built on a foundation of merit. It is built entirely, exclusively on grace.
Grace over merit. Conceptually, that is a total paradigm shift. But how does that mechanically disarm despair in the moment?
It disarms despair because it changes the jurisdiction of the argument.
The jurisdiction. Okay, explain that.
Think of it like this. Despair is operating in the courtroom of merit. It's presenting facts to prove you are guilty and therefore disqualified from healing.
Right, laying out all the evidence.
Exactly. Grace comes in and acknowledges the exact same facts. It does not deny the brokenness or the mistakes you made, but it removes the penalty of disqualification.
It says the evidence is real, but the sentence is canceled.
Exactly. We do not have to earn the right to be emotionally whole. Despair looks at a resume of failures and slams the door. Grace looks at the redemptive power of God and says, the debt is settled. You are entirely made new.
Let's explore what that actually does for a person's daily life then. Because if I truly internalize that I don't have to earn my healing, how does that actually change my behavior?
Well, it shifts an impossible, crushing burden entirely off your weary shoulders.
Because the pressure is gone.
Yes. When you believe you have to earn your way out of dysfunction, every single step forward is fraught with the absolute terror of making a mistake. The internal monologue is, if I fail today, if I lose my temper, if I fall back into a depressive thought pattern for an hour, I lose my healing. I am back to square one.
Which makes the journey completely unsustainable. You're just walking a tightrope.
A tightrope in a hurricane. But when you realize that God's grace is the unshakable foundation of your recovery, you are suddenly given the freedom to stumble.
You can make a mistake without losing everything.
Yes. You are given the space to learn and to grow without the paralyzing fear of immediate disqualification. Grace opens you up to real, sustainable change specifically because it removes the threat of condemnation.
Which perfectly transitions us into the actual mechanics of this change. Because it is one thing to sit here in a room and understand grace philosophically.
Sure, theory is easy.
Right. But it is another thing entirely to walk it out when you are having a terrible Tuesday morning.
That's where the rubber meets the road.
Exactly. So this brings us back to the Word of God, moving into Ephesians 4, verse 23. The instruction here is to be made new in the attitude of your minds.
This verse is the linchpin of the entire framework. And notice very carefully what it does not say.
Okay.
It does not say to have your external circumstances magically resolved.
Wow. Yeah, it doesn't say to be made new in your situation.
Precisely. It locates the profound, transformative renewal specifically and exclusively in the attitude of the mind.
And this connects directly back to verse 22, where we are instructed to put off the old self.
Yeah.
I think we really need to linger on that phrase, put off.
It's an action word.
It is. It implies a conscious, deliberate, intentional choice. It is the active disrobing of old defensive mechanisms. You are taking off the masks you wear to hide your pain.
Yeah.
You are stripping away the cynical thought patterns that you've rigorously utilized to protect yourself from getting your hopes up.
Exactly. It is highly intentional, and frankly, it is laborious.
It's draining, I should say.
It is very draining. Because the old self is not going to politely excuse itself from your life just because you realized you want to be well. You have to actively identify it and take it off.
But the phrase putting off almost sounds too easy, doesn't it? It sounds like changing a jacket before you walk out the door.
Right, like taking off a coat.
Yeah, but anyone who has fought deep, entrenched emotional pain knows it feels much more like trying to peel off a layer of your own skin. It is agonizing.
It hurts to change.
So what does this putting off and being made new look like practically? Let's use a real-world scenario. Let's say you are actively pursuing wellness. You are trying to renew your mind. It's a Tuesday morning, and you get an email from a supervisor that is highly critical of a project you poured your heart into.
Okay, that's a tough morning.
Or maybe you see on social media that a group of close friends got together and deliberately didn't invite you.
Oh, that stings.
It really does. What happens in that exact split second?
In that exact split second, the old self lunges for the steering wheel. The immediate reflexive thought pattern of the familiar pain will be something sweeping and absolute.
Like what?
It will say, I am completely worthless. No one actually values me. Every time I try to do something good, I am punished for it. My life is always going to be exactly this miserable.
It goes straight to the catastrophic.
Instantly. That is the familiar pain speaking. That is the deceitful desire trying to aggressively pull you back into a posture of chronic victimhood over a painful circumstance.
It feels automatic, though. It feels like a reflex you can't control. So what are the actual mechanics of renewal in that moment, before the thought completely derails your entire week?
The mechanics of renewal require a highly deliberate cognitive disruption. You have to catch that thought before it fully takes root in your emotional center.
So you have to intercept it.
Yes. It means sitting at your desk, reading that critical email, and actively refusing to let your familiar pain dictate the entire trajectory of your reality. There is a sequence to this.
Walk us through the sequence.
First, you have to acknowledge the thought. You say, I'm hearing a voice in my head telling me I am completely worthless.
You label it.
Right. Second, you have to accurately identify it. That is a deceitful desire of the old self. It is trying to make me feel helpless because helplessness is what I am used to.
Wow.
And finally, you actively choose a different narrative, you put off the old attitude, and you put on the new.
So the re-narration sounds something like, I received a critical email. It hurts. I feel embarrassed. I need to look at the feedback and see what I can fix. But this email does not define my inherent worth, and it does not mean my entire life is a disaster.
Precisely. You are breaking the catastrophic loop. If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see that renewal isn't about forcefully trying to alter our outward behavior through sheer grit.
Right, just white-knuckling it.
Exactly, it's not that. Nor is it about pretending the painful email didn't happen. It is entirely about shifting the internal attitude toward the circumstance. The circumstance, the critical feedback, or the social exclusion remains exactly the same.
Yeah.
But your attitude toward it has been structurally renewed.
You are essentially contrasting an attitude of heavy resignation with an attitude of realistic expectancy.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Let's define those, because I think that's important. Resignation is a static posture. It says, this will never change, I am permanently stuck, and every bad thing that happens is just further proof of my inherent brokenness.
It's completely hopeless.
Right. Realistic expectancy, on the other hand, is dynamic. It says, I am completely powerless over what my boss wrote in this email, but God can use this incredibly uncomfortable situation to grow my resilience. He can use it to teach me how to separate my identity from my performance.
That is a brilliant distinction. Resignation is the native language of despair. It assumes the story is already over and you lost. Expectancy is the native language of hope. It assumes the story is still being written. And this brings us directly to a vital dynamic from the principles we talk about here at the cafe regarding what is called the hope principle.
Yes, the hope principle. The framework states this very clearly. Hope discovers what can be done instead of grumbling about what can't.
That specific word grumbling is so perfectly chosen because it captures a highly specific human behavior that we all default to.
Oh, we really need to debate the nature of grumbling because it is intoxicating.
There really is.
There is something deeply, almost chemically satisfying about sitting around and grumbling about how unfair a situation is, or how poorly an institution treated us, or how absolutely impossible our circumstances are. Why does that feel so good in the short term, but end up being so neurologically and spiritually destructive in the long term?
Well, grumbling feels good in the short term because it completely absolves us of responsibility.
Ouch. Yeah.
It's true. When we dedicate our energy to grumbling about what can't be done, we are effectively handing ourselves a permission slip to do absolutely nothing.
It justifies our lack of movement.
Exactly. It is a classic symptom of the old self, which constantly demands that the universe cater to its comfort. Furthermore, grumbling is satisfying because it is an easy way to gather sympathy from others.
Right, you get people to agree with you. Oh, you poor thing, that's so unfair.
Yes, it creates a false sense of solidarity without requiring us to take any actual difficult steps toward our own healing.
It is the ultimate stalling tactic. As long as I am passionately complaining to everyone about the fact that the door is locked, I am excused from the heavy labor of looking for a key. I can just stand at the door and be a victim of the lock.
Exactly, you get to play the martyr. But in the long term, grumbling is incredibly destructive because it actively reinforces the neural pathways of helplessness.
It trains your brain to stay stuck.
It trains your mind to scan your environment exclusively for obstacles, blinding you to opportunities. It feeds the exact familiar pain we are supposed to be putting off. You are essentially drinking salt water to cure your thirst.
That's a great image.
It gives you the immediate physical sensation of doing something about your thirst, but it is aggressively accelerating your dehydration.
That is exactly what it feels like. But hope operates on a completely different mechanical level. We need to state this as clearly as possible for anyone listening today. Hope opens the exact doors that despair has slammed shut.
It does. But we must be incredibly careful here not to define hope as mere wishful thinking.
Right. It's not just crossing your fingers.
No, in the context of Christian wellness, hope is not crossing your fingers, closing your eyes, and pretending that bad things aren't happening. It is not toxic positivity.
What is it then?
Hope is a tactical, practical, eyes-wide-open approach to reality. It looks directly at a broken, painful, seemingly impossible situation and asks a highly productive question. What is the next right small step?
What can be done today? Despair looks at the mountain and says, you can't move the whole mountain, so sit down and give up. Hope looks at the exact same mountain and says, you can't move the whole mountain today, but you can pick up a shovel and move one rock. You can make one phone call. You can schedule one appointment. You can choose to forgive one small, specific offense.
Small, actionable steps.
Hope takes the massive, overwhelming abstraction of recovery and breaks it down into actionable reality.
Hope is the engine of the renewed mind. Without it, the effort to change simply drains us until we collapse back into our familiar pain from sheer weariness. But with hope, we are propelled forward, even when the circumstances around us remain fiercely difficult. And this directly addresses the reality that we are not going to be shielded from pain just because we have chosen to pursue wellness.
Which brings us to what I believe is the most vital truth in this entire curriculum we study. I want to isolate a core quote here because it is incredibly profound.
Let's hear it.
It says, throughout our lives, we will continue to encounter hurts and trials that we are powerless to change by ourselves. But with God's help, we can be open enough to allow those very circumstances and situations to change us, to make us better, not bitter.
Better, not bitter. That right there is the ultimate fork in the road for every single person who experiences trauma, profound hurt, or a major mental health struggle. It is the defining choice of human resilience.
Let's look closely at the inevitability of that change, because I think we often harbor a quiet delusion that we can just, get back to normal.
There is no going back to the old normal.
Right. You're going to change. Painful trial is going to alter you no matter what you do. You cannot go through a severe multi-year season of clinical depression or a painful, highly public divorce or a deep relational betrayal and remain static.
It's impossible.
You cannot emerge on the other side of trauma as the exact same person you were before it happened. The change is guaranteed. The only variable, the only thing you actually have any agency over is the direction of that change.
That is a staggering realization when you truly internalize it. The pain will alter your internal landscape. It will rewrite your perspectives. You will either allow that profound alteration to curdle into bitterness, or you will partner with God to allow it to refine you into something better.
We need to explore the mechanics of bitterness for a moment. What actually happens to a person's mental health, to their worldview, when bitterness is allowed to take root?
Well, bitterness is a highly corrosive state of being. When it takes root, its primary function is isolation. It turns a person entirely inward.
They just close off from the world.
Completely. You become hyper-focused on the injury you sustained, constantly replaying it, constantly examining the unfairness of it. Bitterness makes you inherently suspicious of any kind of community because it convinces you that every new person you meet is ultimately going to hurt you exactly like you were hurt in the past. It assumes bad faith in everyone.
It creates a catastrophic self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if you deeply believe the world is fundamentally cruel, and you consequently act with suspicion, defensive hostility, and guardedness toward everyone around you, well, people are naturally going to pull away from you.
Of course they are.
And when they inevitably pull away, the bitter mind says, "See, I knew it. Everyone leaves, the world is cruel." It perfectly validates its own twisted narrative by manufacturing the exact abandonment it fears.
That is the tragic loop of the old self. Conversely, hope allows our attitudes to continuously change for the better. When we intentionally choose the difficult path of betterment over the easy path of bitterness, we foster resilience.
We learn to connect again.
We cultivate an ability to connect deeply with others, not in spite of our pain, but often through a shared understanding of pain. Betterment turns our deepest wounds into a source of empathy rather than a source of hostility.
It is the difference between an open wound that becomes infected and a wound that successfully heals into a scar. A scar still clearly shows that a severe injury happened. It doesn't erase the past. But it is closed. It is healed. It doesn't actively bleed all over the people who are trying to love you today.
I want to pause here. I want to speak directly to the person listening right now. Just you, sitting wherever you are, and the truth of your own life. Are you resisting healing simply because you are terrified of who you will be without your familiar pain? Let the weight of that question sit with you for a moment. Are you choosing the grim predictability of your depression, the familiar hum of your anxiety, the safe walls of your isolation, over the unpredictable, beautiful, demanding challenge of being made well? Are you letting the voice of despair tell you that you simply don't deserve the immense effort it takes to heal?
It is a heavy, confronting question. But it is one born entirely out of a desire for your absolute freedom. We bring this up because we have had to answer it ourselves. In fact, let's bring this right down to the ground level between the two of us here.
Okay.
Let's talk heart to heart. I want to challenge you to share a specific area where you used to rigorously grumble about what couldn't be done, but where hope finally stepped in and showed you what could be done.
I can speak to that very clearly, and it directly involves the struggle between betterment and bitterness. For a long time, I struggled profoundly with forgiveness regarding a specific individual who had caused a significant amount of damage in my life.
I remember when you were going through that.
Yeah, it was rough. The deceitful desire in that particular situation was the burning desire to hold on to the offense. It felt protective. It felt like holding on to the anger was the only way to ensure justice was served.
You wanted them to pay for it.
Exactly. My grumbling was constant. I would tell myself, and frankly anyone who would listen to me, that the relationship couldn't possibly be repaired or moved past until they offered a complete, unequivocal, perfectly phrased apology. I focused my entire emotional energy on what they couldn't or wouldn't do.
You essentially outsourced your own emotional wellness.
Yeah,
You were waiting for their action to determine whether or not you were allowed to be at peace.
I did. I handed them the keys to my mental health. I was entirely stuck in the familiar pain of rehearsing the injury. Every single time I rehearsed it, I felt a toxic but deeply validating surge of self-righteousness.
It feels so good to be right.
It does. But eventually, hope began to shift my focus. Hope asked the tactical, practical question we talked about earlier: what is the next right step for your peace?
Wow.
Hope showed me that while I absolutely could not force an apology out of them, I could choose to release my internal demand for one. I could proactively choose personal peace over vindication. The hope principle shifted my entire attitude from helplessly demanding a change in their behavior to actively allowing God to change my own heart, making me better and freeing me from the heavy bitterness that was isolating me.
That is such a powerful testament to the actual mechanics of mental renewal we see in Ephesians 4. You had to actively put off the attitude of a victim who is perpetually waiting for an apology and you had to deliberately put on the attitude of someone taking full responsibility for their own internal peace.
It took a lot of work.
And I think your story highlights exactly why we so deeply need a community to help us see those blind spots. When we are isolated, our grumbling sounds completely justified. The echo chamber of our own mind agrees with us completely.
Which brings up a highly crucial point of real-world application here. How does coming to a physical space like the small groups at Peters Creek Baptist Church on Friday nights actually help pull us out of our isolation and force us to face our fear of change?
Well, community breaks the echo chamber of despair. It is really that simple, but profoundly difficult to execute. When you are sitting alone in your house, the deceitful desires sound exactly like absolute truth.
They sound like facts.
They really do. The voice of despair feels like cold, hard, logical reality. But when you physically step out of isolation and sit in a circle of people who are actively, aggressively pursuing Christian wellness, those lies are immediately exposed to the light.
Because in isolation, you convince yourself that your specific struggle is entirely unique and therefore completely incurable.
No one understands me.
Right. But in a community setting, you hear someone else across the circle voice the exact same fear, describe the exact same familiar pain, and suddenly the lie of uniqueness is shattered. You realize you are not uniquely broken. You are simply human, and healing is a shared collective journey.
When we gather at the cafe, or in our specific small groups, we are practicing the putting off of the old self together. We lovingly challenge each other's grumbling.
We have to.
When I start passionately complaining about what can't be done, the community listens, validates the pain, but then points me directly back to what can be done.
Huh.
It forces us to face our fear of change because we are watching other people change right in front of our eyes. We see the living, breathing proof that hope actually works.
And that right there is the call to action for anyone listening today. An openness to change does not require you to have everything figured out in advance.
Thank goodness.
Right. It doesn't require you to fix all your problems, clean up your act, or silence your anxiety before you show up. Often, the very first, most profound step of putting off the old self is something incredibly simple and tactile. It is simply stepping out of your house to share a meal with people who genuinely understand the exact struggle you're going through.
Yes, it is the tactical next right step. If you are weary of the familiar pain, if you are drained by the deceitful desires constantly calling the shots in your life, we want to formally and warmly invite you to join us. We meet at Peters Creek Baptist Church in South Park, Pennsylvania, every single Friday night.
The structure of the entire evening is designed specifically to meet you exactly wherever you are on your journey toward wellness, whether it is day 1 or year 10.
Let me break down the weekly Friday schedule for you so you know exactly what to expect, removing as much of the unknown as possible.
Eliminate the surprises.
Exactly.
Huh.
At 6:30 p.m., we start with large group worship. This is a dedicated time to center our minds and focus entirely on the grace we've been talking about today. Following that, at 7:30 p.m., we break out into gender-specific small groups. This is where the real, honest, echo chamber-breaking conversations happen.
That's where you realize you aren't alone.
And finally, at 8:30 p.m., we gather back together at the Crosstalk Cafe for fellowship, coffee, and connection.
And there's a very special opportunity coming up that we want to make absolutely sure you know about. Breaking bread together is historically one of the most disarming and natural ways to step into a new community.
Our next dinner is happening on Friday, May 29th, from 5:15 to 6 p.m., right before the main programming begins. We are serving an amazing taco bar.
It's going to be great.
We will have seasoned ground beef, chicken, cilantro rice, black beans, chips, salsa, and all the toppings you could possibly want.
It is a perfect low-pressure environment to take that vital first step out of isolation, and the cost is intentionally structured to keep it accessible for everyone.
The cost is just $5 for adults, $3 for ages 6 to 17, and kids 5 and under eat completely free. We also have a $25 family maximum, so you can bring the whole crew without worrying about the financial impact.
If you are listening to this right now and you realize it is finally time to stop letting despair slam doors in your face, we want to help you find your place in this community.
To find a group near you, or to get more information about everything we've discussed today, you can head directly to our locator website. Go to crlocator.com. That is crlocator.com. Just enter your zip code and it will guide you right to us.
If you have specific questions, or if you just need to reach out to a real human being before you take that brave step through the physical doors, you can email Craig Amstone directly at craig.amstone@gmail.com. Or you can contact the main church office at info@pcbc.church.
We truly, deeply hope you will take that step. We hope you will choose the brave, unpredictable, deeply rewarding path of betterment over the familiar ache of bitterness.
As we close our time together today, I want to offer one final provocative thought for you to carry with you into your week. We spend so much time discussing the massive, overwhelming amount of energy it takes to change. We worry that we simply don't have the strength required to be made new. But consider this tonight. What if the immense, draining effort you are currently expending every single day just to maintain your walls, to protect your old wounds, and to feed your familiar pain is the exact same amount of energy required to step completely out of the dark and into a renewed mind?